hi to anybody and everybody who's watching. And thank you for joining us today or tonight or whatever time it is you're tuning in from. My name's Hannah. I'm the co-founder of Shado Mag, which is a community platform which is built on self-narration and uses arts, journalism and activism to unite people around issues of social justice. And I'm so excited to be hosting our first event of 2022, which is supported by the good folks at Go Climate. So thank you very much to them. And there's been a slight change to the lineup of the panelists. And so I will let my panel introduce themselves, so you'll get to know each of them. In terms of housekeeping, if you have any questions for our panelists, the last 15 minutes or so, I'll open up to you, the audience. So if you just write a question in the Facebook chat comment bit, then we'll try to get to as many as possible. Yes, so I will start with Jhannel, who is taking the place of Sam, who very sadly has got COVID. And yeah, I'll leave it to you to introduce yourself.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for inviting Land in Our Names, or Lion, to speak this evening. Yeah, really sorry that you don't get to hear Sam talk, because they're great, but hopefully there'll be other times when you can. So Land in Our Names, we work around racial justice and land justice in Britain is our focus. But lots of issues around climate justice and environmental justice feature in our work. And as a Black-led collective, as we originally founded by myself and another person and a team of people who are currently working on issues around access to land, particularly for food growing and farming, with the idea that, you know, we have a responsibility to care ecologically for the earth and work in harmony with nature. That as people who are of African descent, you know, from lots of different countries, but predominantly with Caribbean heritage in the team, that we think about the impact of colonialism and enslavement, exploitation on the earth as well as on people. And Britain is the belly of the beast. And you can see colonial dynamics in the land system here, as you can in many other places. And I'm really excited to hear from the other panelists about their specific contexts. So I'll leave it there. That's my intro, but thank you again.
Yeah, thank you so much. And again, for coming on at such short notice. You're a real hero. Thank you. And then Jhannel, can we hear from you if you're next on my screen?
Thanks, Hannah. And thank you, Jhannel, for that introduction. So my name is Jhannel Tomlinson. I'm based in Jamaica. And today I'm representing two groups in particular. So that's the Young People for Action on Climate Change Jamaica, as well as Girls Care, which is Girls Climate Action for Resilience and Empowerment. And both of these groups would have been co-founded by myself and another colleague. And it was in response to the fact that within the climate change space, we sort of recognized that, you know, though there was emerging, you know, attention being paid, there were particular groups that were being left out, and that's young women. So we wanted to create that space for them to be able to get engaged, empowered, learn and teach each other. And so we wanted to create that space for them through, you know, both of these initiatives. And so Girls Care seeks to work at the intersection of climate justice and just overall youth empowerment and engagement, particularly rural youth, and looking at how, you know, they have often been left out of a lot of the ongoing conversations, despite being among the ones who are most impacted. When you look at the livelihoods, you know, of their families, you recognize that their parents, their relatives, the majority of them are farmers, they're fisher folk who rely so heavily on the environment. And so even a slight change has, you know, all these repercussions in the household. And so we wanted to make sure that those young people were not, being left out and being a part of the conversation. And so through both of these, we have been able to, create opportunities for engagement, for mentorship, but it's on the ground work. And so we hope that today we'll be able to share the experiences that we've had, the experiences of some of our other colleagues in the Caribbean, and, learn from some of the other panelists as well. So thank you, Hannah, over to you.
Thanks so much, Jhannel. And we are waiting on Helena, who might be having some difficulty joining. But for now, if Kato, you could bring us home, that would be great.
Hi, everyone. My name is Kato Ewekia. Everyone and my friends, family call me Kato. You guys can call me Kato as well. I'm from Tuvalu. I'm 25 years old. Currently, I'm living in Tuvalu right now. And Tuvalu is located in the middle of the South Pacific. And I am representing Saving Tuvalu, collaborating with Fridays for Future and Ecosites. I'm also, I went last year to COP26 in Glasgow, and I'm currently working as the PA of a minister here. I am the director of Saving Tuvalu. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much to all three of you. Yeah, not only is this our first event of the year, I think it is our first one since COP. So it'll be interesting to go into that a little bit later. But yeah, thank you so much, all of you. And I wanted to start off with quite a broad question, but one which I think will set the tone for today's discussion, which is how do we define reparations when it comes to climate justice? It might be different for different contexts. But yeah, I'd just love to gain your perspective. And anyone can start. I won't bring anyone in if they don't want.
Okay, so I'll have a go, just to kind of contextualize my view of reparations. So I think oftentimes when you hear the word in certain spaces, it's almost like a moment, like persons tend to shy away from the conversations because there's often the debate as to whether or not reparations make sense in the current context. Is it something that descendants of those who were colonized should be able to benefit from? And so there are always these ongoing conversations about reparations and what it is, who should benefit, and all these different topics. But when I think about it as an attempt to right the wrongs that were meted out to these persons. It's about making amends, remedying the harm, the damage, and the losses that have been endured by the descendants of some of the persons that were, so impacted by what colonialism brought about, particularly to, certain countries. And so when I think of it, irrespective of the fact that, there is the ongoing discussion that nobody that is alive today should be able to benefit from reparations, I do think that the psychological impact, the physical impact that colonialism has had on certain areas, particularly colonized regions, is something that should be considered, is something that should, be given some consideration when we think about it, and how persons have had to, endure certain struggles because of what had happened in the past and how it has impacted their individual and collective futures. So I think, just to provide a quick summary, when I think about it, that's a snapshot of how I perceive it and what I see it to be. And I think a lot of persons as well within communities that were colonized and that were, destroyed as a result of those capitalistic intensive activities feel as well. So I don't know which of the other panelists want to add, but I think I'll just pause here in providing my initial thoughts.
Thank you, Jhannel. That's really spot on. I wanted to add something in quite early on in the conversation, that breaking down the etymology of the actual word is reparations being about repair, and that makes it a lot easier to talk about. I think if you're in a conversation where people agree that there's been harm, then talking about repair or moving forward is a positive way to go about it, whereas I think a lot of people can feel quite intimidated by, famous, very, very close to the last words of Martin Luther King. I think he was killed 2 weeks after saying, "We're coming to get our check," after talking about the economical impact on African Americans of enslavement and all the exploitation that followed that. There's a really good quote by someone called Chinwezu, and that is very much around what you were talking about in terms of psychological repair, social, educational. And the quote, it's quite long, so I won't read the whole thing, but it ends by saying, repairs of every type in order to recreate and sustain Black societies. So there's an awful lot of the reimagination that has to take place as well. And in a land context, and in the context that I'm working in, it's about making visible a lot of the purchases from colonial wealth, and the people that are due to inherit wealth or due to inherit land, to engage with a dialogue around this future, so that you can share wealth, land, and power equitably. And the people who are quite alienated from rural spaces, a lot of Black people and people of colour are really concentrated into inner cities in Britain, that there isn't that kind of separation, segregation in the future. And if we think about how the aristocracy owns land and what the impact of the monarchy has been on people's housing, health outcomes, access to nature, and that's before even going into farming, which is, a sort of passion of a lot of people within Land in Our Names. So working on agriculture, environment, horticulture, and thinking about, what the imperialist dynamics have been and how that leads us up to now. And then how can we redistribute land? How can we encourage people of color, Black people, to have a relationship to land that is repairing that harm and repairing the land itself as well? That's a really important aspect, that we have a moral imperative to do that. And from all around the world, you've got people who have been stewarding the earth for centuries and taking all of that really amazing knowledge and communing with the land through that redistribution and through that increased access to wealth or land itself.
Thanks so much, Jhannel. And we're now being joined by Helena, but Kato, if you wanted to kind of say your piece, then please do, and then we'll introduce Helena afterwards.
Reparation. Reparation is broadly understood of something to compensation of something that is damaged. So I would like to talk about my experience of reparations in Tuvalu. So Tuvalu, in the capital, Funafuti, we lost 2 of our islands during the one of the cyclones in 2015, and 2 of our islands has disappeared. Tuvalu is a flat that we don't have any mountains, so reparation is something like the damage is we lost our 2 islands, and compensating of what we have lost. And there's a lot of things that have been happening here in Tuvalu, and things that happens here. Those are sorry, I'm quite nervous when I'm in this kind of meeting, and it's my first time. So, and yeah, and for the global north to show support to the global south, because we understand that the damage that the global north is affecting the global south, including Tuvalu, the lowland, the low-lying land here in the South Pacific. So yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Kato. And yeah, you don't need to be nervous. You're brilliant. All the work you do is inspiring. And welcome, Helena. Oh, hi. If you'd like to just introduce yourself to our audience, and yeah, just a little bit about yourself, that would be brilliant.
Thank you so much. My name is Helena Gualinga. I'm 19 years old and I come from the Ecuadorian Amazon, from a community called Sarayaku. Sarayaku has a long history of battling with oil companies, and with that has come a lot of human rights violations from both the state, the government, and from the oil companies themselves. So basically, indigenous people here in the Amazon have been protecting thousands and thousands of acres of rainforest of the Amazon, and that's also a work my community has been doing. And my role, I guess, in all of this have been to advocate and to spread the message to other sides of other parts of the world, to, you know, whether it is about an oil spill or funds needed, or just sharing something from our everyday lives in the community, just to show, kind of change the narrative about indigenous people that is often very, very wrong in many contexts, especially here in my own country in Ecuador, where there's a lot of racism towards indigenous people. And I think the exploitation of our lands and of our territories and the Amazon comes a lot from that vision of we can exploit the Amazon and we can exploit the earth, but we don't care about the people living there. So it's this mindset of exploiting people and exploiting earth, and yeah.
Thanks so much, Helena, and welcome. It's great to have you here. I wanted to go just right back to you, actually, to ask kind of what do reparations look like in practice for you, for all the work that you're involved in?
I think reparations, I'm sorry, there are a lot of noise here, but I think reparations, it's not something that you're like, oh, we're helping some people over here. We are supporting them. We are supporting, indigenous people. It's an obligation, because this is not something that we caused to ourselves. Climate change is not something that we caused. The oil spills that are happening in the Amazon is not something that we caused. The floods that are happening in the Amazon are not what we caused. So it's an obligation for people that have done this to us, that have contributed to the system, to make sure that our basic human rights are covered, our basic human needs. We're not asking for much. It's reparations is not, telling people like, oh, you did this and now give me a ton of money. No, it's not about that. My community last year lost the main bridge. We lost plenty of houses. My family lost my uncles lost their homes. Many families lost their homes, and my community was completely underwater. And we lost our crops, everything that has to do with food security. And this was right when the pandemic was happening as well. And until this day, there is no bridge. I mean, we've been able to build up our houses now, but that's our own effort. But the bridge is still not there, and people need to cross the bridge every day to go to their crops, to go to school, to work. And it's impossible. I mean, we have canoes, but usually you just have one canoe per family, and you're usually more than 5 people in one family. So reparations in that case would mean that we would have our bridge back. that we would get our bridge back, because that's not something that we're able to cover for. That's not something that we can build for ourselves. But reparations are also, you know, there was just this massive oil spill here in the Amazon a couple of days ago in Ecuador. It's, I mean, the company, the government, they're saying, oh, they acknowledge that there is a spill, but they do not acknowledge that the spill actually is going into the rivers. And that means that there are no measures to actually clean up the oil that's going into the rivers. Reparations is also making sure that the people that are affected by it have water, that they have shelter, that they are able to have food. And that's what I'm saying. It's basically just covering all the basic needs a human being needs, and making sure that their home is a safe space. And I think it's really important now, especially for me, when I see these things happening here in the Amazon, and you know, my relatives that are just a little bit up north from where I am right now are suffering with this, and to say that, you know, they actually need support and reparations right now. This is not the first time that it's happening, and actually oil spills happen in the Amazon all the time. It's just that they don't make it to the news because they're not major, because it's like, you know, it's so normal that it doesn't make it to the news, not even the local news. It only makes headlines whenever it's like, you know, a huge disaster, when it actually will have impacts for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years. But just in the last 2 years, we've had 2 massive oil spills in the same river, and to the same people. I'm Quechua, but to the Quechua people in up a little bit north from where I am. And last time, I mean, we are people that our lives depend on our hunting and on our crops, and you know, the water that we drink comes directly from the little streams, from the little creeks around our houses, and we take baths in the big rivers. And when that is, you know, filled with oil, we're not able to do that. We're not able to drink our own water. But not just that, we cannot hunt, because the animals that we hunt drink the same water. The animals that we hunt eat in our own, you know, in our own fields. The animals that we hunt come to our fields and eat there, and then we're able to hunt them. So everything that we base our lifestyle on is completely destroyed. And here in Ecuador, it's so bad that it's, you know, they're not even able to acknowledge the damage that they have done. They're not even able to, because with acknowledgement, then action maybe could follow, but they're not even acknowledging the damage that they have done. So yeah, there's a lot to say about reparations, but I'll leave it there.
Thank you so much. And I think you make a kind of really important delineation between reparations and aid, because aid sort of like, that's not what people are asking for. And I suppose that would just like replicate the structures that kind of have caused this marginalization anyway. So thank you so much for that. And I wondered, maybe Kato, like the first thing you said to me actually was, oh, you might not have heard of Tuvalu. And so I wondered whether Helena's comments about places not making like front page news resonated with you for your context.
Can you please repeat the question again in a bit
Yeah,
simple
of course.
terms?
Sorry, I just wanted to kind of hear your thoughts on what reparations look like in Tuvalu, especially as it is a place and a region which doesn't get kind of Western coverage.
So okay, as you mentioned before about that we don't want aid. So the global north has been showing, you know, support, but as you said, we don't need it. But as we want reparation, because those are things that that sustains how can I say it? I'm really sorry. My English is really terrible, and I'm trying to put the things
You're doing great.
together. So for these two islands that has disappeared, that as a young youth of Tuvalu, that we want our reclaim land that has been disappeared. The global north is not really showing support on the global south, especially Tuvalu. I believe that when these two islands disappeared, no one knows about it, and everything that was on the island are dead. These two small islands, we put it there as a conservation area for us to sustain the living things that is on there, so that our children can also see what we've been saving for the next generation to see. But then no one even cared about things that is happening here in Tuvalu. So the other reparation that I want to share to you about that during the cyclone, the same cyclone that hit Tuvalu, our ancestors in a graveyard. When the graveyard was along the beach, and when the waves hit some of our islands, and it dug out of our grave, and the bones of our ancestors came out of their graveyard. And I was thinking, like, if Tuvalu disappears, where would my ancestors' dry bone will end up? Where will I end up in the future? Also thinking that people were giving us options. The global north has given us option or ideas for us to migrate. I'm like, what, we don't want to migrate. This is our home. Imagine if you came here to our island, to our land, and imagine if you are from this island. Imagine your home is here in Tuvalu, and people had to take you away from your home. And I don't want that, because I want my children to grow up in Tuvalu, to know their mother tongue. Also, I would love them to know our culture and skills. And I like to sustain. If the global north don't, if the global north don't do anything about it, don't care, and don't improve on carbon emission, decrease usage of oil, increase usage of renewable energy, we would disappear, and we will lose everything. If we have to migrate, it will take everything away of us being a Tuvaluan. And I'm just it's the time for wake up. It's early morning here, but excuse me. We want sustainable policies from the leaders there in the global north. There's a lot of things that's been happening here in Tuvalu, but since because of our time, and I'll just let me brief a bit, and then I'll continue. Thank you.
I know you're muted.
Oh, sorry. I just want to say, yeah, thank you, Kato. But actually, Jhannel, would you like to kind of weigh in on that?
Yeah, and I think Helena and Kato both spoke about it. So when we think about aid, it's more of charity. It's more of, you doing somebody a favor because you recognize that they're in a situation of need. But I think the difference between aid and reparations, the reparations is pretty much showcasing to you that it's a deeper understanding of what is owed, and what is owed because of what was done in the past that had repercussions then and are still having repercussions. Jhannel mentioned the issue of land and land access. That is something that we have here in the Caribbean as well. we recognize that because of what is considered crown land and what is considered, land that is owned by wealthier families, then there are disparities in, access for prime agricultural land, for certain groups of individuals to be able to own land for themselves and their families. And again, that is something that has transcended from then until now. And again, I just feel like the whole aid versus reparations conversation, and I'm happy it's something that came up as well, because while both of them may seem similar, or while they may seem as if, okay, you're providing some amount of benefit to individuals or to groups that have been marginalized or groups that are vulnerable, they are different in the fact that one is more being done out of the need to, help, because you see where persons need help, while the other is saying that, this is a challenge that was caused probably not by you directly, but influence of, individuals in your space, maybe your ancestors, maybe your government, maybe systems that were in place in your country contributed to this. And so I think we need to step away from this idea of aid and recognizing that reparations, particularly for, groups that were directly and indirectly impacted, is something that we need to consider. And particularly, again, in the Caribbean and small island states, highly vulnerable to the impacts of climate change, highly vulnerable to, ongoing economic challenges and crises. And I recognize again that, how connected colonialism, capitalism, and reparations are. And so I do think, that is something that needs greater attention. Persons need to step aside from, looking at it as even, as Josina said, the fact that if they identify that there's a challenge, that there may be a need for solutions, I do think that they need to recognize that, okay, we may have done some harm. We in fact did some harm. And maybe if we did not, a lot of these spaces would have been able to thrive. A lot of these spaces would have been able to develop better and the development that they consider development. So I think within the context and within the space, those are some conversations that need to be had, and not only to be had at the high level, but incorporating those, who are on the ground, incorporating both a top-down and a bottom-up approach to how we look at the issue. So I think those are just some of my initial thoughts around the topic as we look closer at aid and reparations.
Thanks so much. And Josina, it would be great to kind of hear your thoughts as well, kind of as someone who's speaking from like a slightly different context by being based in the UK.
Yeah, well, I mean, it feels really like small fry to talk about how that aid mentality gets translated into a context where Black people and people of colour are sort of treated as projects, for like diversity initiatives, or, like people hear about Lion's work and then try and fit it into a very sort of piecemeal, tokenistic, we are aware of the lack of diversity in the fields that we're talking about, like agriculture, horticulture, environment. And, these are organizations that often have a lot of access to land, wealth, and power. And then to translate that into, oh, we want to help you. And, often pairing, Blackness, Africanness, people of the global South with something like, what was the word I was thinking of? Underprivileged or disadvantaged. And, how did we get to that place? And that is the conversation that Lion is interested in. And I guess like aid hasn't featured as much in, our work on the sort of global level. But, one thing to really note is that, as we are in the belly of the beast in England, the responsibility really heavily lies with English, the English systems that were set up, economic systems all around the world to privilege this country. And it was forced, and aid continues to mimic that. And there's so many scandals in the aid world, NGOs, and it's from the debt that is owed to, countries in the global north, which is appalling. Haiti should not owe France anything. It's always that we have given more as people who are descended from enslaved, exploited, colonized countries and peoples. We've always given more than we'll ever get back. And any aid now is often tied to conditions which continue to restructure economies and continue to perpetuate these systems. And I'm glad that Jhannel brought up the Caribbean and in terms of how that land dynamic continues. And there's same families that own land in the Caribbean exist and are in Parliament in Britain. Richard Drax is a famous example as a plantation owner in Barbados, and he's got a massive estate in southwest England, and he's been asked to give up the estate. And Barbados is an example of somewhere that's very vocal and really empathizing with what Kato was saying about the trauma that's been done because of natural disasters to islands. And as a Caribbean descended team in Land in Our Names, like we're seeing what's happening to island nations and really feeling that. And my heritage is from Grenada, which was affected by a horrific hurricane. I think that was 2005. And so really knowing that vulnerability, that infrastructure can be completely wiped out, and that emphasis on aid after something like that happens, of like, no, we gave our lives and our families were destroyed and everything about our way of life was given up for Britain and for the economic systems that we have now. We didn't farm here before, but we farmed for here. You took our spices, you took produce that we made with our own hands. You forced us to do things, subject to torture for centuries. There is no way that if your climate impact is now infecting us and we're on the front lines, that you don't owe us this support. And we're so far from that conversation. I'm really sad to say that the British government that we've got here is not in a position where they're going to apologise. And in fact, it's going the other way. And they're making sure that they've got, all of their Tory friends in positions of power in the British Museum, fighting back against Kew Gardens or the National Trust, who are trying to, engage with decolonising conversations. The backlash is really harsh at the moment. But we have to keep going because they know that they're losing, and that's why they're panicking, and they don't want this side to win. But we might if we keep going.
Thank you. And yeah, I feel like we've skirted around it slightly. So I'd love to kind of talk to everyone about like the links between colonialism and capitalism and reparations. And yeah, if someone wants to start us off on that, I know it's a meaty topic. Or if Jazina, if we could go back to you doing
that. Anti-capitalist analysis and how that links to colonialism and reparations. I mean, I feel like I said a lot of it before, but without explicitly naming capitalism. I mean, so much was put into developing capitalist model at the expense of so many other ways to form society and organize around, common land ownership or, transactional relations, mutually beneficial relations with land or, communities. And yeah, I mean, there's people that or there are countries that are culpable in that, and any attempt to kind of not divest from the capitalist systems are heavily frowned upon. We've seen that in lots and lots of different places, Grenada, Ecuador, like over time it's happened a lot again and again. And it's very, I don't think it's easy, like within capitalism, to create like, you know, opportunities for reparations that aren't on a sort of, you know, micro or individual basis. But yeah, we shouldn't have the conversation around what reparations needs to look like without talking about, yeah, the elephant in the room, maybe, which is capitalism.
Yeah, I think just to kind of touch on something that Jessina just said, so colonialism did in fact contribute to this system of capitalism. It's very intensive kind of structure, this very resource intensive way of living. And I think when we look at it, both capitalism and colonialism worked to steal, to exploit, and to destroy resources, not only resources, but when we look at it, cultures, human beings, people's way of life, how they, you know, knew or how they came to know about certain things. And then this introduction of this new style of, whether it be for the case of some of our Caribbean islands, the plantation model, how that became very intensive sort of agriculture. So while a lot of persons were used to more subsistence and, you know, growing food for their families and home gardens and backyard gardens, this idea now of having to remove all the trees, you know, this issue of deforestation, because you wanted to create this intensive system of agriculture, it did in fact erode a lot of sorry, it did in fact erode just our resources, individuals' way of living, how they were able to, you know, exist with nature. And I do think, as Jessina said, within the capitalist model, it's going to be very difficult to say, okay, we need to provide reparations for those who were impacted, because again, persons don't even recognize it as something that they are willing to take blame for. And again, just the whole the way how the structure in itself is built, it won't allow for persons being compensated for, you know, the challenges that were meted out to them. And so I think that while something important, I don't even know if it's going to be something that we see in our lifetime. I know that recently at COP, there were these ongoing discussions. The Prime Minister of Antigua and Barbuda spoke about reparations and the importance of it for, you know, Antigua and Barbuda as small island developing countries, and, you know, how they would have been impacted as a result of colonialism and the issue of climate change that we now have to contend with. And again, it was a battle when we look at the issues related to loss and damage and what that means for small island developing states, and then the issue of climate finance and how we think about that. I think there are all these different interconnected issues that lead back to the fact that, you know, colonialism did in fact contribute to where we are today. But until there is recognition that these countries played a part, I don't think we will ever be able to, you know, have any sort of benefits, tangible or intangible, from, you know, these challenges that were endured. So yeah, those are my thoughts.
Thank you. Thanks so much, Jhannel and Jessina. And kind of, yeah, so I think we've sort of established throughout today's talk that we do need to kind of abolish the systems that were put in place to create the need for reparations. But I kind of turning to like possibly a slightly more hopeful couple of questions. I wondered that maybe Helena, I could start with you. Like, how would you see reparations kind of feeding into reimagining kind of a climate just future?
Wait, can you repeat the question?
Of course. So how would you see reparations kind of contributing to climate justice and kind of in if we can achieve them in the future? What would that look like?
Well, first of all, I think climate justice looks very different in every, you know, for every people or every place. But touching on the first question that you had about colonialism and capitalism, I think they're kind of linked to this question. I think one example of how colonialism and extractivism and capitalism are linked together is here also in the Amazon, because one of the ways of that extractivism actually got here was by with the colonizers that came. I mean, my people, we live in a colonized world, but we're not letting ourselves being colonized yet, and we're not. And I mean, I'm you know, if we actually like look at history here, there, you know, you can see times where a certain people were colonized, and I think like one of, you know, like the reason why we have such a big and very strong movement right here in this part of the Amazon is actually because we live in the headwaters of the Amazon. So like all the people came up, like went upstreams, hiding from the colonizers. And that's why we're actually, I mean, I'm Quechua today, that's why I identify as, but a couple of hundreds of years ago, I'm probably a mix of a lot of people, and you know, that's how we were kind of able to hide here, and that's why colonization and the colonized world came to us very late, in comparison to other people, for example. But one way of colonizing the people that, you know, were able to hide was actually through religion and with the missionaries coming. And that was a way of colonizing our minds and colonizing our bodies and our territories. And that is actually also what allowed in the extractive industries. It would, here in Ecuador, in many parts, it was actually the church that did that, that sold off our lands. And just to give you a simple example, some of my neighbor communities over here, they're fighting a hydroelectric power station. It's one of the most, you know, probably one of the most beautiful places I've ever been to, a beautiful crystal clear river. It's considered one of, you know, those biodiversity hotspots recognized by all the, you know, environmental institutions on national, international levels, but yet the Ecuadorian government gave out concessions to this company. But if you look back to the history of this place, how it actually started was by the church stealing the land from indigenous people, and then they sold it off for very, very cheap prices to settlers, and the settlers then go and sell them to the companies, and then the government gives up the concession, and no indigenous people who actually have lived there and are the guardians and the custodians of the land don't have a legal say in it. And one of the things that we've been talking about here, and I don't know, this is something that maybe will happen in 50 years, 20 years, but hopefully it will happen, is that we are able to recognize all this land as our own, as that we will be the custodians and the legal custodians of this land. But there is also a responsibility from, for example, institutions as the church that have played a huge role in stealing our land. And for us, reparations would mean that, you know, they would first of all recognize this. For example, it's not just the church, this is just an example. They would recognize it, and then you know, they will support and make sure that we're able to legalize our lands and get them back. I think that's one part of the reparations, is actually giving us back our lands, and that also connects to climate justice, because, you know, if we're living on our lands, but it's not even considered our lands. If we're living on our lands and they tell us that you're stealing from me if you're living there, but then we're the same people that keep protecting those areas and that are the most affected by climate change. There is no climate justice. So a lot for us here, it's about actually having the legal custodianship over our territories, and that's what we are fighting for, and that's the main mission of I think of indigenous people in Ecuador, and especially in the Amazon, to have our lands and territories recognized as ours, and with that we're able to protect it against the government and against the extractive industries. Actually this year it's 30 years ago that this part the Amazon where I am in now, in my community, for example, got their first legal recognition by the Ecuadorian government. And with that recognition, which came from a huge protest with thousands of people walking to the Capitol 30 years ago. Wait, give me 1 second. I'm sorry. I'm also babysitting my nephew. Where was I? So for us, that was one of the tools that we were able to protect ourselves from when the oil companies came to my community, for example. So that's a huge part of what climate justice means to us, that we are actually able to live on our own land and that we're able to keep taking care of it. But when we are affected by climate change, for example, when the floods happen, that there are reparations that make sure that we can continue doing that work and that our basic human rights are respected.
Thank you so much, and hi to your nephew as well. Yeah, I think that it's funny kind of hearing everyone speak makes me almost question the title of this webinar, of whether reparations can actually be a solution, because there's something that is so urgently needed and owed. But yeah, I wondered if any of the other kind of panelists had any thoughts on how reparations can lead us towards a more climate just future. Or yeah, alternatively, how, like, whether we think reparations can ever hold kind of a solution to the centuries of harm that have been kind of inflicted upon the climate.
Thanks, Hannah. So I think given the urgency with which we are expected to act to reduce some of the impacts on climate change, and given the lack of urgency with which, rich nations have refused to accept liability or any calls for compensation, then as much as I'd like to be optimistic that, reparations can indeed feed into a climate just future, given the realities that we are facing, I don't know how much effort would come from them to be able to utilize reparations as a way for transitioning into a sustainable future or a climate just future. I just feel as though for climate action to be considered useful, it has to happen now. And we talk about the issue of we want climate justice, we want climate action, and we want it now. But I think that where reparations are concerned, there have been a lot of lags. There are still a lot of gaps. There's still a lot of challenges with having people recognize just the liability, or having them accept that liability. And so as much as I would like to think that reparations can provide opportunities for increased adaptation, for increased awareness, or providing opportunities for indigenous communities, I don't think that there is urgency that is being placed on reparations for us to see tangible impacts that can in fact produce positive outcomes.
Thank you. And yeah, sorry, there's a bit of a delay. Go for it.
I was like to give an idea. I understand that capitalism prioritizes profit over people, and if we imagine the system in human development prioritized rather than economic growth, because when there's no human if there's no human development, there can't be any economic growth. So I was thinking that we could, to give an idea that could create a new system to prioritize people over profit, and that enables reparations. Yeah, that's it. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Kato. Yeah, I totally agree. And I think to kind of round it off, and thank you so much to everyone who's tuned in, and of course to all the panelists as well. It's been absolutely incredible just being able to listen to everyone. I know we're kind of looking into a very bleak situation on many counts, but I wondered whether kind of anyone had any hopes for this year in terms of the movement, in terms of kind of successes that are on the way. Helena, I know you kind of mentioned a big success of the community, and yeah, I wondered if everyone could kind of give me a hope for the year in terms of the movement going forward.
I can go. I can start. Context is very different in England, Britain, but there is a new organisation that's sort of been up and running called Resource Justice, which is about getting people, young people who have wealth, probably particularly inherited wealth, to engage with social justice issues through redistribution efforts. And thinking about, reparations, I think that it needs to be part of the conversation always, whether we think it's going to work, whether we think that governments are suddenly going to go, oh, you know what, we should apologize and we need to promise that we're never going to do that again. I don't think that's going to happen. But that doesn't mean that it doesn't need to be, a strand of what we're fighting for all the time. And in the context of Britain, I think working with people who understand about the role of inherited wealth and understand the role of, that they can play at an individual level, then that can start to build a groundswell of support for redistribution of, in the interest of like land and wealth. And I know that that's happening in the States as well. Now, obviously, that's not quite climate reparations, which I think by the nature have to be on a bigger scale. But linking that with, the idea of corporate liability or loss and damage, and the need for reparations in other countries, particularly in the global south, particularly former colonized places, it's about building those links, and stopping David Attenborough, I think, is a very important part of this, because not all humans are liable for this mess that we're in. And that kind of narrative and the population reduction narratives, this is a massive bugbear of mine, of like, we just can't allow that to continue. It's not humans, it's corporations, it's militaries, and they've been allowed to get away with this for a very, very long time. And we don't need a cuddly elite granddad to tell us that it's all our fault for plastic straws. So please end that. And I hope that we can see a climate just future that will always consider reparations.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I totally concur with all of that. And then, yeah, I don't mind Kato, Jhannel, or Helena, if anyone wants to come in with, their hope for this year.
Thanks, Anna. So currently our ongoing efforts with young women, happily, we did receive some funding recently to scale up the current work that we're doing. So I'm really looking forward to engaging more young women across the Caribbean, other countries that we weren't able to work with before. Really looking forward to that, and kind of just helping, to empower and create opportunities for them to engage with each other surrounding the issue of climate reparations. Josina made a good point in the fact that irrespective of the fact that we recognize that, these larger institutions may not apologize for what has happened, reparations need to be a constant part of the conversation. And so with that said, I think what we need to increasingly do is to make sure that it's always engaged in whatever talks, whatever webinars, whatever, thematic discussions we're having. And so that is something that I will make sure that we do moving forward in our mentorship conversations as well, just making sure that reparations has its space and it's that, constant thread. So looking forward to that engagement and to also, having increasing the support from these different countries. So thank you so much. And yeah, I'm looking forward to hearing a lot of positive things from you guys and your organizations as well.
Thanks, Jhannel. And yeah, Kato, why don't you go next?
Thank you. My country hopes that for the better future. Reason why I went to COP is that I went to search for solidarity, and also looking for partners. And I would love that all the youth, because we are the leaders of tomorrow, and I would love for all of us to work together. I did not go there to, not only to look for solidarity and search for partner, but I also went there to, to tell you guys that we are suffering from the climate crisis that the global north is doing, and we want you to stand with us, because if Tuvalu sinks, all of the world will be affected. I would like to take this sellotape and imagine it's a globe, and we are all living in this globe. And if the global south is affected, I believe that later on the global north will be affected as well. And the hope of my country that we could all work together for the better future of us. If we save Tuvalu, we can save the world. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Kato. And yeah, Helena, what are your hopes for the year?
Sorry for the barking in the background. I think, well, this year is like, honestly, it's gonna be a very tough one for the Amazon. We have just last week, the new government announced that they're gonna double oil exploitation in Ecuador, and we were all wondering where that is going to come from, because the only untouched rainforest that there is in Ecuador is under indigenous custodianship. It's either in the National Park Yasuni, where the indigenous people in voluntary isolation live, either there, or it's where I live, or where I have relatives. And last week they announced that they found oil in a neighbor province here, and the mining is expanding on a very, very dangerous rate here in Ecuador. It was just on a call with one of my friends in a neighbor community as well, and how mining is affecting his community. And their homes and places are disappearing day by day, and trying to stop that, it's going to be a really, really tough year for everyone here. So one thing I really want to say is that keep an eye on the Amazon this year. A lot of support is going to be needed. A lot of things can happen. A lot of these things can get violent. And there are always human rights violations when these things are getting started. But one thing that does make me very, very hopeful is that two lawsuits made it to the Constitutional Court. My community is the first community in Ecuador to take the government to an international court, and one which has set a precedent for the entire country and for several other countries in Latin America when it comes to oil extraction and mining, especially about the free prior consult. And that's a very, very important thing that happened a couple of years ago. And due to that, more and more cases have gotten visibility and have been able to win their lawsuits within Ecuador, which has been really positive. And two of those cases that have won got selected for the Supreme Court to be revised, and they will look through that lawsuit, and a decision is expected this year whether oil exploitation is able to continue or not in Ecuador. Basically, what's going to be decided is who gets to decide where, if, and where and if oil is exploited. So if we get victories in those two legal cases, it's possible that we are able to actually protect our territories from oil and mining, and it would set, it would be, it's basically what we need right now to protect our territories, and it's something that would change the course of our fights forever. So I'm really, really hopeful for that, and really cheering on the communities that are leading this. So hopefully that we will see a victory, but that's also something that needs pressure, and it needs international pressure, but because the judges and the politicians, they hate to get, they hate to get bad press. So keep supporting us from the other side of the world as well.
Thank you so much, Helena and Jessina, Jhannel and Kato. Thank you so much for being such a brilliant panel. It pains me that we're out of time, but yeah, I just wanted to say a massive thank you. It has been so insightful. I'm very lucky to be able to host. And yeah, thank you to all our audience for tuning in as well. And please do take from this panel the important messages that the panelists have been sharing with us. Please support the causes that they talk about, and go on to find out more as well. But yeah, that is it from me. And to everyone, just thank you so much, and goodbye.